Hello family and friends in Lower Nicola. My name is Angie Bain. For those of you who do not know me, my parents are Larry and Ann Shooter. My grandparents are Arthur and Lizzie Shooter from Zut. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to the Cultural Heritage Policy today. We define a cultural heritage resource on page 6 of the Mutual Benefits Agreement as something that is an archaeological site, something of importance to the community for scientific purposes, intellectual property, anything that is of relevance and evidence to our use and occupation of our traditional territory. But more practically, it's actually just evidence on the land of our use, be it burial site or could possibly be art. So things like petroglyphs and pictographs are evidence of our use of the land. I got involved in developing the Heritage Resource Policy when the negotiations committee who had read the initial mutual benefit agreement felt that the language was quite weak in terms of protecting our heritage resource and even defining the heritage resource. And I expect that was done in consultation with the legal team. So they sent me the very small sections from the mutual benefit agreement saying, look, we don't think these go far enough, and asked if I could read over those sections and perhaps strengthen the language. I took a look at it and agreed that it didn't go far enough and suggested a couple of options. Given the amount of time we had, which was pretty tight, I said I could help strengthen that language, or we could do something a little further, which is something I think our community has been working towards for many years now. And that is putting together an appendix document to go with the agreement. And that appendix document could outline some of our core protocols and traditions, really defining who we are as Lower Nicola Indian Band and what it means for us having them go through our territory. So the Heritage Resource Policy has actually come from all of the work that we've been doing up until now. Land claims traditional use study, land code planning, community meetings, mapping, the stories that we share. It's something that comes from that. And the core principles that I outline in the policy are things that were taught to me by my community. So, for example, things like respect for the land and the resources. That's something we've always been taught. Well, our Heritage Resource Policy looks at two very distinct things, I think. It looks at helping educate and define for those who are wanting to do work in our territory, our protocols and traditions, and our connection to the land and resources. And on the other side, it outlines some very practical ways that we expect them to engage with our community should they be doing work throughout the territory. This is a sort of document that I've seen other communities develop and use, and it can be quite an effective tool for them. It's something that, on a very practical level, outlines who you are, what your expectations are for anybody working in your territory, and so it puts you on the same page. We're in a unique position, I think, that we weren't in 1950 when the initial pipeline went through. Before then and since then, we've seen the impact on projects like this through our territory. It could be very practical things like when they're constructing a line, they leave mounds of dirt behind them. And the Cultural Heritage Policy is our opportunity to say, this land is important, these resources are important, and this is what we expect you to do if you're doing any work in our territory. So I think the conditional agreement with Kinder Morgan in particular will help show them that we're not just another community along the line. And that's one of our fears as a community, I believe, is that they'll take a cookie-cutter approach to these agreements, and they won't consider the uniqueness of each community as they go along. And so I think that the Heritage Policy will help strengthen that statement that we're making, that you are asking to go through Lower Nicola's territory, and that this territory comes with it our expectations. in terms of how it will impact our work going forward with Kinder Morgan, I think it helps define that relationship, and it lays out in very practical ways things like how we expect responses to any potential emergency situation, God forbid that should happen, but any spills, very practical things in terms of what we expect them to do going forward. And I think it forms the basis of our relationship. So our relationship going forward with them, this is an X number of years agreement, but what you're talking about when you're going through our territory is a long-term commitment to our people and a long-term commitment to our territory. No, I don't think it should just apply to this particular agreement. It was developed in response. The urgency, I guess, in the development is in response to this project. But as I said, it's something that we've been working towards for decades. And it's something that a lot of communities are using themselves in any project that goes through their territory. So at the Union of BC Indian Chiefs here, we did working with communities in British Columbia. I can't remember how many years ago now, but a number of years ago, we developed a heritage resource toolkit. So basically a template that communities could use going out and developing their own heritage resource policies. And that was one of the first things I looked at when I was looking to develop the Lower Nicola Indian Band's heritage resource policy. In addition to that, looking at how other communities are using their own policies. And there's tons of examples out there. Tsleil-Waututh, for example, has been doing some amazing things with their heritage resource policy. And it can translate into things like research protocols, permitting. So anybody wants to come through, maybe we decide we want to issue them our own unique archaeological permits. Something for the band to consider somewhere down the line, I think. I just wanted to say that it was my pleasure to work on this very basic draft policy on behalf of my community. I'm hoping that going forward, we get input from the very knowledgeable and capable people who make up our membership. In particular, I'm thinking we need to strengthen things like the language that I use in the document. I think language is an important tool, and it's a good way of asserting our knowledge and understanding and connections to the land and resources. But I'm not strong enough alone to put that into this document. So I gave some examples in the policy, and I'm hoping that our elders, our youth, our linguists, our knowledge holders will all come forward and volunteer their expertise so that we can make this one of the strongest heritage policies out there. A final point I'd like to add is that we didn't have time, unfortunately, to work with other Ntlakatma communities in the development of this cultural heritage policy, but we did make efforts to reach out to them. So, for example, we know that the Ntlakatma Nation Tribal Council has been doing extensive work on cultural heritage and cultural heritage policies for the nation, and we tried to tap into that, but we unfortunately were unable to, given the amount of time we had to put this draft together. But it is something I think going forward we will work with other Ntlakatma communities to standardize that message we're all putting out there, because really what we're talking about is what it means to be Ntlakatma and what our land and resources mean to Ntlakatma people. And I think that consistency in message only makes us stronger.